Hi folks, it's James here. Welcome to another video. In the background you can hear this record. This is Riverside Jazz, and I think this is we're on side 2 here. Johnny Griffin in the Still of the Night. This is an old compilation, a Riverside compilation I've had for many years. I bought it in Leeds back in probably the late 90s from the Oxfam shop in Headingley. And it was a blind buy. Got it for £4.99, and it's a marvellous compilation. It's full of it's kind of like jazz but also soul jazz. You've got some organ stuff on here. You've got people like Junior Mance, the Junior Mance Trio. You've got some really good British stuff, the Don Rendell New Jazz Quartet, and people like Ian Carr. You've got the Bill Evans Trio. You've got Monk, Johnny Griffin, Wes Montgomery. It's a tremendous compilation. I do like Riverside as a label. I think it often gets overlooked in favour of, Blue Note and Prestige and other labels. There's the beautiful Blue label. Recently I bought a second copy of this to give as a gift to my good friend John Bellamy. And when it came through the door, I looked at it and I thought, wow, it's in much better condition than mine. And for half a second I thought I would end up giving John this old one and keeping the nice new one, but in the end I actually gave John the newer one and kept this one. Not particularly out of the goodness of my heart, but it's just one of those things when you've had a record in your collection for a long time and it's a bit scuzzy and it's a bit crackly, but you get used to the sound of it. And in the end I just couldn't face parting with this one, even though it was not in as good condition as the one I was going to give. And I think perhaps more so than my rock collection or my pop collection, jazz records, they seem to have some kind of, I don't know, sort of ambience to them. And you get used to the sounds of the particular crackles and the spits, and I just found that I wanted to keep this one, so there you go, make of that what you will. Anyway, yes, going to show my jazz collection today, or at least start doing that. This video, I think, will probably end up being in at least 2 parts, because I don't want to make them too long. Been listening to jazz for a long time viewers to my channel might know that I used to be a jazz critic for the Guardian newspaper in England. That was a job that I fell into completely by accident. It's a very long story. I might link to a video somewhere where I explain that story. It's a video I made a long time ago, but I had to learn on the job, really. I mean, just to cut a long story short, I kind of bluffed my way into the job, and I had to learn about jazz really quickly on the hoof. And I'm just going to keep showing records, and I kind of bluffed my way into it, and then I did start to learn more about it, and I did half consider trying to become a proper jazz expert back in those days. There was a guy who worked on the Guardian called John Fordham, who'd been doing it for many years, and I bought his book, and I seem to remember once sitting in a motorway service station on my way to review a gig somewhere, and I was reading this book, and I said to myself, I'm going to become a proper expert in jazz and like really get to know my stuff. And that never really happened, really. I decided that, John Fordham already was a huge expert on that paper, and it didn't need another expert or a pretend expert like me pontificating around. So I drew back, really. Jazz is a music that I do enjoy and I do love. It's not my first love, rock and pop is kind of the music that I grew up with, but I do enjoy a bit of jazz from time to time. Most of the records that I bought, well, they come from a variety of different places. When I worked for The Guardian, I used to go and review a lot of jazz up and down the country. I used to go to jazz festivals, for example, the Wigan Jazz Festival, and they would often have record dealers there in the intervals selling records in the lobbies of the various venues, and that's where I picked up a lot of stuff. I also used to find things in charity shops and that kind of stuff. I haven't got a really massive collection of jazz on vinyl. I do have quite a lot on CD. So this is Cannonball Adderley and Milt Jackson, Things Are Getting Better, and again that's on Riverside. And I'm going to show these records in the order in which they were released. Right, this might get a bit confusing. I'm not going to go by the date that they were recorded. I'm going to go by the date of the actual version of the record that I have. So that one, for example, this one is a US pressing from 1959, but originally it came out in 1958. So that's the wonderful Cannonball Adderley and Milt Jackson, the vibe player. And again, that's on Blue Riverside. The next one I've got for you, there's two actually. These two come as a pair, from Spirituals to Swing, volumes 1 and 2. Volume 1 came out in 1962, this record, although it was recorded in 38 to 39. So this was a legendary jazz concert organised by the great jazz evangelist John Hammond, and he put together this incredible bill at Carnegie Hall in 1939, and it featured a lot of big names of the day. People like Count Basie were on here, James P. Johnson, stride piano player. It was kind of like a mixture of jazz and blues stuff as well. Let me quickly show you this record. It's on Fontana, just on Black Fontana. So I have volume 1, and then I also have volume 2 as well. This one contains quite a lot of boogie woogie kind of stuff. It's got Meade Lux Lewis, Albert Hammonds and Pete Johnson on here, the boogie woogie pianists. It's also got people like the Benny Goodman Sextet. It's got the Golden Gate Quartet on here, the Kansas City Six featuring Buck Clayton on trumpet. Oh, and I can see this one was bought from Cobb Records, one of my favourite record shops in on the west coast of Wales. And again, this one is on Fontana. This one was undated. I'm not sure what the actual date of release was, but again, it comes from those concerts, 1938. Is it 1938? 38 to 39 at Carnegie Hall. I think they're quite legendary, these records, and so it's quite good to have those in the Vanguard series, from Spirituals to Swing. Next we have a bit of a hoary old jazz classic. I see this a lot in the VC. This is Monk's Dream. I did buy this from a jazz festival foyer, I seem to remember. This is 1963 version, but it was originally released in 1963. This is a UK pressing of this classic album. And I do like a bit of Monk, CBS. I am a bit of an amateur pianist, and I did once learn a Monk piece on the piano, and I think it was a 12-page piece, and it took me about 2 years to learn it and memorise it. I can't play it anymore, I've long forgotten it. But I do like Monk. He has a very vinegary style, kind of almost discordant, pushing at the boundaries of what was acceptable harmonically at the time. And you know, he was a great eccentric, and his stuff is very sparse and strangely architectured, and it's always a good listen. It's quite funny, when I grew up, jazz was abominated in my house. My dad was a classical music buff, and he always hated jazz. The one jazz piece that I can remember listening to when I was growing up, it was a theme tune to a British science show called Tomorrow's World. And it was a piece of kind of English modern jazz, and my dad absolutely hated it. He hated the stridency of it. He still can't listen to anything kind of big bandy or beboppy. He just loathes it. So I grew up in a kind of environment where jazz was fairly loudly and stridently dismissed as complete rubbish. So when I got into my 20s and I started to learn about jazz and to enjoy it, and the thing is, I became a drummer as well, so I started to learn how to play some jazz stuff, and I kind of learned to appreciate it and enjoy it. So that was quite interesting when you grow up and you're in a place where jazz or a particular kind of music is not approved of, and then you kind of have to come to it yourself later on in life. Anyway, sorry, long ramble. Sonny Rollins, Three Giants, Clifford Brown and Max Roach. This is on Prestige. Let's have a look. Beautiful label, and there we go. And then this is a reasonably recent purchase. I do occasionally buy jazz records still when I see them. I was delighted to find this in a junk shop in my hometown. This is Getz Gilberto, Stan Getz, Juego Gilberto, featuring Antonio Carlos Jobim, and it's their famous album in mono, The Girl from Ipanema. Actually, the record's not actually called that, but that song is on here, that tune is on here. Beautiful record. It's on Verve, and kind of jazz meets bossa nova, very cool sounding. A little bit of crackle on that one. That is a UK pressing from 1964. Originally it was released in the US in '64 as well. Okay, this one I think is a fairly common record. I have a fair few Charlie Parker records. I just pulled this one out because I like the cover. This is Yardbird. I do love Charlie Parker. I love that very fast, agile bebop style. I'm a big fan of Max Roach, who was the drummer who played on a great deal of his stuff. And I like the early bebop. It's very adventurous and exciting, and it's got a kind of febrile quality to it. You get this kind of sense that they were adventuring into new realms, and I mean, they were really trying to annoy the white audiences in the room, really. You know, bebop, I think, was an attempt to pull jazz away from the kind of slightly mannered thing that was going on. You know, the white people had appropriated it to an extent. You have people like Glenn Miller, and of course you have people like you know, Paul Desmond and Dave Brubeck and people like that. Well, that was a bit later, but anyway, Charlie Parker's stuff is quite it's quite harmonically adventurous, and it can be a bit of a tangle at times, but it's very invigorating to listen to. I like listening to Charlie in the car. This is a 1965 UK pressing, and the first pressing came out earlier the same year. Next record that I showed recently when I was talking in my Christmas video about influences and inspirations, check out that video if you haven't done already. Django Reinhardt excuse me, was a big influence on Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath, and when Tony Iommi lost the tops of his fingers in an industrial accident in a West Midlands factory, he almost despaired and gave up playing, and then someone played him a Django Reinhardt record, because Reinhardt had also lost a couple of fingers, and Tony was inspired to meld some squeezy bottle tops to the tops of his fingers and to get back to playing. Anyway, this record, Memorial for Django Reinhardt, this is Disc Vogue. I think this was a series, volume 54. Don't have any of the other volumes. It's rather a nice label. French, I assume. French spelling of the word disc. Le Disque. It's a UK 1966 pressing, originally recorded though in France in the 40s and 50s, and yeah, that's a nice thing to have. I found that in a clearance warehouse place when I went down to do some. I went down to volunteer for a charity shop chain in the UK, and that was one of the records that I salvaged from the dumper. Right, this next record, I got a feeling I bought this in Amsterdam, I think years ago when I was on holiday there. This is Max Roach, the drummer I mentioned earlier, the guy who played with Charlie Parker a lot. He also played with Monk and all sorts of great people, and he made a lot of solo records as well. This one, I knew about this one. This is Drums Unlimited on Atlantic, 1966, and this is a US copy. I knew about this because of Bill Bruford from Yes and King Crimson and Earthworks. He was really into Max Roach. His style is quite close to Max Roach's. It's got that kind of very crisp, crackly quality to it. Bill Bruford recorded a version of the Max Roach tune, The Drum Also Waltzes, on one of his albums years ago, and he did it on electronic drum kit, so it was quite technological. This record contains the original version of that. It's a waltz for solo drums. I just love the way that he just looks very scholarly. You know, in rock music, the drummer is often seen as being the wild one, and even the dumb one sometimes, but I love the fact that Max Roach consciously, he put himself across as an intellectual, and his playing is incredibly intelligent and you know, learned, and the stuff he did was just marvellous. I could never hope to play with anything like his style or grace, or his technical expertise. Okay, got 3 left for this first instalment. This is a reasonably recent pickup, probably maybe 2 or 3 years ago. This is the Art Farmer Quintet, plays the jazz hits. I don't know a great deal about Art Farmer. He's a trumpet player. On this record, you've got Jimmy Heath on saxophone. It's an interesting record because he does versions of jazz tunes by other people that you know really well from other places. You know, so he does Round Midnight, Sidewinder. So you've got kind of, you know, Lee Morgan, Miles Davis. There's a version of Take 5 on here. There's a version of The In Crowd, and he just does his own versions of them. So it's almost like a kind of parallel universe experience. The versions are, they're not like a million miles away from the originals, but they're just a little bit different. So that was a nice thing to find. I found that on my local market stand here in Lancaster for a couple of pounds. That is 1967, and it's a UK pressing. Okay, another classic, another jazz classic, Sonny Rollins' Tenor Madness. Again, I'm fairly certain I picked this one up from the lobby of a jazz festival back in the day. And let's get the version of this. This is a UK reissue from 1968, originally a US release 1956 on Prestige. And Tenor Madness. This is not his most famous record. His most famous album is Saxophone Colossus, which has Max Roach on it. This one has Paul Chambers on bass from Coltrane's band, Philly Joe Jones on drums, who's another incredible drummer. There's the label for this one. That's a nice record. It's very kind of straight ahead, hard bop, lots of energy, very invigorating. They've got a great sound on them, these old records. You know, these old Prestige records and these Riverside records, they just sound fantastic. They really sound as if the band are playing in the room, you know. Wonderful stuff. And the final one for this first instalment, another reasonably recent pickup. I got this from Oxfam in Lancaster. This is Phil Woods, who is another kind of great American saxophonist. He made tons and tons of records. Interesting lineup on this record. It's got Tommy Flanagan on piano, who is in one of Miles Davis's quintets, I think, from back in the day. I think he's on, isn't he on Milestones? Could be wrong. And you've got Curtis Fuller on trombone. This is The Rites of Swing. A very nice record. It's a mixture of hard bop, but it also has some more impressionistic stuff on it, some more abstract things. You know, he was a post-Coltrane musician, so he was into exploring you know, Mogul jazz and more kind of abstract explorations, shall we say. This is a US pressing from 1972, but originally it came out in '61 on the Candid label. Okay, so I shall leave it there for today. I hope you enjoyed that. Looking at what I've got for you here, this may well end up being just a two-part video. Like I said, I don't have a massive collection of jazz on vinyl. I have a lot more on CD, but I thought I would keep this to a vinyl-only edition. So, hope you enjoyed that. Leave some comments below, let me know what you think of what I've shown, and if you've got any other information that you want to give me on those records, or if you have any of them yourself and know about them and want to chat about them, down below is the place. Okay folks, I shall see you very soon. Take care. Bye bye.